Mayor Latoya Cantrell's office says her husband, Jason Cantrell, has passed away.
You've confirmed the husband of New Orleans Mayor Latoya Cantrell, Jason Cantrell, died of a heart attack.
People of all walks of life packed in New Orleans church today to say their final goodbyes to the city's first gentleman, Jason Cantrell.
Thanks for watching. I'm Katie Moore. Sharice is off tonight. We begin tonight with the sad and sudden news that Mayor Latoya Cantrell's husband, Jason, has died.
Yo, check this here out. This ain't no bedtime story for your kids. Nah, this that deep cutthroat New Orleans energy. That type that got folks side-eyeing City Hall and whispering and calling the balls from uptown to the Ninth Ward, you heard me? We talking about Jason Cantrell, the man who once wore the crown as first gentleman of the city, husband of Latoya Cantrell, the mayor who stayed in headline like it's her full-time job. Jason came up in the Indo, born and raised. Now they transplant from another city. His pops, that retired magistrate judge Harry Cantrell, a cat that sat on Orleans Criminal District Court like a heavyweight. Jason had them roots in the law game before he even thought about taking the ball. Born into that legal royalty, he ain't grew up starving, but he damn sure grew up watching how the justice system really flexed in the city. That background stamped him early, son of a judge, but out here carving his own legacy. He laced his own game with education, went through law school, came out swinging with that degree, then jumped right into the trenches as a public defender. And let me tell you something, being a public defender in New Orleans, that's like playing defense against Michael Jordan on the basketball court with no shoes, busted floorboards, and the refs already paid off. Man was standing next to cats facing decades, trying to keep the scales of justice from leaning all the way crooked. But Jason ain't stopped there. He made moves into the city's attorney's office, played that role for a minute, learning how the city itself runs its legal operations. Then boom, he flipped into private practice, taking on criminal defense, civil, and family cases. Dude has his resume stacked up like Mardi Gras beads on a power line. He was that attorney you called when the system had his boot on your neck, and word on the street was he ain't ever forget the little guy. Now life ain't all depositions and defense strategies. Somewhere along the line, fate lined him up with a woman who was grinding just as tough, Latoya Cantrell. Back then, she wasn't Madam Mayor. She was just Latoya, a fighter in her own right, working in the trenches of community activism, rebuilding and riding for the city. They linked, sparks flew, and by '99, they made it official. Tied the knot, locked it down. Folks said it was that ride or die kind of love. The judge's son and the activist's daughter-in-law building their name together. Not too long after, they brought a daughter into the world, Ray Ann. Family unit looking solid. The Cantrells out here doing Sunday service, block parties, and graduations, all while Jason kept stacking his courtroom rep. He wasn't flashy with it. Nah, he ain't chased no cameras, but people who knew, they knew he was one of them cats that gave the law profession some actual soul. Still, every scandal gotta have a shadow creeping around the edges. His life looking picture perfect. In New Orleans, that usually means something about the crack. By the time the 2000s rolled around, Jason had the lawyer game locked in, public defender stripes already earned, city attorney gig under his belt, private practice popping. He was that dude you saw on Tulane and Broad, suited up, fighting for dudes who ain't got two nickels but got the whole system leaning on them. And everybody in the city knew, being a defense lawyer in Orleans Parish, like jumping in the second line with half the band playing off beat and the cops chasing the tuba player. Pure chaos. But Jason kept composure, kept fighting, kept proving he had that fire. Meanwhile, Latoya ain't sitting still. He riding hard in Broadmoor, rebuilding that whole neighborhood after Katrina tried to drown the city. She out here hustling FEMA, organizing folks, saving houses brick by brick. Jason right there in her corner though, the type of husband who was in front page, but he was back row steady supporting while she made her political climb. By 2012, Latoya on the city council. Jason still pushing law cases, still got that rep as the judge's son, who ain't coached on his daddy's name. Nah, he earned his keep. The Cantrells started looking like that local power couple. One running policy, the other holding court in the courtroom. Folks at parades whispering like, yeah, that's them Cantrells. They making moves. Fast forward to 2018, Latoya breaking barriers. First black woman to sit in the big chair as mayor of New Orleans. Historic moment. Cameras everywhere. Second line dancing through the quarter. And right next to her, Jason, who now the first gentleman. That's a title the city ain't ever used before. But Jason wore it cool. Like he knew he was writing a new page in the history books just by standing there. Here's the twist, y'all. When you sitting high up on them city hall balconies, every move getting watched. Every smile analyzed. Jason ain't a politician, but once Latoya hit mayor, his face got tied to the game whether he wanted it to or not. People expecting him to play the supportive husband role, but also whispering, wondering if he gonna slide into politics too. He ain't do that though. He stayed low key, letting Latoya ride her own wave. Still, when your wife, the mayor of New Orleans, is city that love drama more than crawfish balls, you gonna be in the crosshairs whether you ask for it or not. And that's when the shadows started stretching long. But yeah, the Cantrells looking like a power couple from the outside, but insiders knew eyes was watching. Jason in the courtroom, Latoya in City Hall, and rumors floating through the street like a key carol live. The city still respected Jason, no doubt, but in the background, gears were grinding. People starting to whisper not just about politics, but about personal lives, about loyalty, about how close Latoya was keeping certain people in her circle. And while Jason kept his head down, while he stayed grinding in the legal field, the stage was already set. The city didn't know it yet, but this story, it was already leaning toward that dark twist that the NO always got waiting. August 2023 hit like the know you clap. News broke quick. Jason Cantrell, first gentleman of New Orleans, gone at just 55 years old. Headline saying heart attack. Coroner holding it close. All the confirmation is later in City Hall pushing out condolences. On paper, it was sudden but simple. Natural causes. That's what the record stamped. But you know New Orleans ain't nothing never just simple. The minute that news hit, whispers cut through the city faster than the street dude running from 12. People in the bars on Claiborne, you know where the people hang under the bridge on Mardi Gras. Even old heads playing dominoes uptown saying, man, that shit don't sound right. That man too young, too sharp, something off with that story. The official version and the street version split like two parades heading down different routes. On one side, WWL and the Associated Press printing heart attack in the story. On the other side, the city itself buzzing with that unsolved mystery type shit. People pointing at the timing, the streets, the politics, shadows hanging over City Hall. Heart attack, they said, or something we ain't being told. And then came the memorials. August 21st, Gallia Hall opened its doors. Jason laid in state. The public walking by to pay respects. The city came out heavy. From big name officials down to folks he'd once helped in court. The next day, that jazz funeral rolled through Blessed Trinity Catholic Church. Brass band blasting, crowd crying, city mourning. Man who once stood steady beside the mayor. Even in the grief though, I still stayed sharp. The streets couldn't shake that tension, cause in New Orleans, funerals are half tears and half truth telling. People came to honor Jason, but the conversation outside them church steps, different energy. People connecting dots, talking about politics, about loyalty, about how sometimes the most official stories be the ones we question the hardest. Jason's death didn't just leave Latoya a widow and Rayanne without her father. It cracked open a hole in the city's trust. The mayor's husband gone, and no matter how many press releases said heart attack, that suspect angle dug in deep, sitting in the people's mind like the last song on the radio that you can't get out your head. And when the city mourned, when the band packed up, when the last umbrella folded at the jazz funeral, the real question hung in that humid night air. Was this truly the end of Jason Cantrell's story, or the start of an even darker, deeper chapter? Here's where the plot thickened like a roof for Thanksgiving gumbo. While Jason laying low, holding down the role of husband and father, another story been brewing in the background. The name, Jeffrey Vappy, a cop NOPD assigned to Latoya's personal detail. On paper, he was just security, but in New Orleans, just security sometimes mean right-hand man, and maybe even more, much more. Federal prosecutors laid it out in the paperwork. By late 2021, Latoya and Vappy had an intimate personal relationship. Not rumors, not speculations. That's the feds talking. That means this all started almost 2 years before Jason's sudden death in 2023. And by the time folks were warning him in Gallia Hall, streets already buzzing with side eyes about the mayor and her bodyguard. By 2022, local media already sniffing around. Something smell off. TV stations pointing cameras at the Pentabla apartments, checking timesheets, questioning how much time Latoya and Vappy was spending up there on the city dime. New Orleans don't dismiss nothing. People watching, screenshot saving, clocking the hours. Jason still alive then, still the first gentleman, but the affair so obvious Stevie Wonder could see it. In August 2023, Jason gone. Official story, heart attack, street story, suspect, and what's floating in the streets, Latoya still riding with Vappy, even as folks put Jason in the ground. That timing had the city talking louder, connecting dots, conspiracies running hot like a spicy bull from rolling with Milia. Fast forward June 2024, Vappy resigns. By July, he indicted on fed charges, wire fraud, falsifying records, misusing his police role. He pled not guilty, but the paper trail ain't light. Then August 2025, boom, the mayor herself get indicted. The feds saying she used city cash to cover up that same relationship. A whole scheme laid bare, running from 2021 to mid-2024. Start to finish, overlap with Jason's final years. So imagine how them whispers felt in hindsight. Jason gone at 55, heart attack, stamped on the report. But the city, knowing the man's wife had been running around with her bodyguard for years. That's the kind of mess that keeps scandal energy thick. Official record clean, but the real life reality full of contradictions. Jason death sitting in the city where the mayor's alleged corruption and a fair timeline overlap too neatly. Folks on the street, that's not coincidence. That's evidence, you heard me? And that's why even today people talk about Jason Cantrell, not just with respect, but with suspicion. The story ain't just a lawyer who rose and fell. It's about how one's man's sudden death got tangled in the power plays, secrets, and scandal of New Orleans politics. Jason Cantrell's name still ring out in the endo, but not in the way the history books might have wrote it. As a husband, he stood beside Latoya from the grind days in Broadmoor to the bright lights of City Hall. From their wedding in '99 to raising their daughter, he played his role steady, even when the camera started turning on his wife. New Orleans don't remember you just for the resume. This city remember you for the whispers, for the stories told on porches and in the corner stores, for the second-line rumors that float longer than any newspaper headline. And when Jason dropped dead in 2023, 55 years old, the split between the official story and the street sealed his legacy. Street side, nah, something off. The timing, the politics, the fact that while the city mourned him, his wife was already knee-deep in scandal with her bodyguard. Two everyday New Orleanians, that smoke from a fire nobody wanna admit burning. But that's the other layer, the unsolved mystery vibe. But that other layer, that unsolved mystery vibe, gonna follow this story forever. Cause when you got federal indictments laying out affairs, corruption, and cover-up, and you got a debt that people call suspect in the same breath, the lines are real blurry. You can't separate the man from the mess he was caught inside. Jason Cantrell's death, it became about shadows, about scandal, about a city that never stopped asking questions, even when the paperwork say case closed. So when New Orleans speak his name now, it ain't just rest in peace Jason, it's rest in peace Jason. But what really happened? And that question, that little side-eye suspicion, that hum of the second line drum that don't quit, that's what makes his story feel less like an ending and more like an unsolved mystery still marching through the streets of the NO.